I'm Margaret Finch, 66 years old, and when my son invited me to move in with his family, I thought it was a blessing. After my husband died, I'd been living alone in Wisconsin in the little house we built together. But when Wade said I should come, live with him and his wife Tracy, I packed up everything I had and let the realtor hang a for sale sign on the lawn. It was a warm spring day when I arrived at their house in Lake Forest. Big windows, spotless white siding. The kind of place where nothing ever seems out of place. I had no idea that stepping through that front door would start the loneliest chapter of my life before I go any further. Let me know where you're listening from in the comments and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever learned something hard about someone you love growing up in Minnesota. My parents taught me that family came before anything else. We didn't have much, but we had a strong work ethic and a table where no one ate until everyone was seated. When I married Robert at 21, we made do with what we had. He worked long hours driving freight, and I spent 3 decades in a textile plant bent over sewing machines, breathing in fabric dust, and pushing through back pain that never really went away. We raised 2 kids. Wade and Gloria and I thought we'd done a decent job. After Robert passed suddenly 3 years ago, Wade started calling. More often, he said he didn't like the idea of me living alone. Said it wasn't safe at my age. He and Tracy had a big house with space to spare and Kira, their daughter. My only granddaughter was starting high school. I remember the way he said it over the phone like it was all settled already. Sell the house? Mom put the money somewhere safe. Come live with us. We'll take care of you. And maybe I wanted to believe that more than I should have. The day I arrived, the air inside their house smelled like citrus and floor polish. Tracy greeted me with a glossy smile and air kisses near my cheek. Wade stood just behind. Wade, her inexpensive clothes. I knew he couldn't afford outright. He hugged me like we hadn't seen each other in decades, even though he'd only come home for Robert's funeral and stayed less than a day. Kira called out a quick hello from the stairs, but never looked up from her phone. I followed Wade up to what he called my room. A small, windowless space tucked at the far end of the hallway with a twin bed and barely enough room to turn around. I didn't say anything, then just smiled and set my suitcase down. I'd been promised the larger guest room with the private bath, but apparently that had become Tracy's office, and the bigger bedroom was now a home gym. You know how important fitness is, Wade said with a chuckle. I nodded and told him it was fine, even though the pain in my lower back was already flaring up again that night at dinner. The table was set like something out of a catalog. White plates, silver cutlery, wine glasses. Kira kept her phone out until Wade told her to put it away, and then turned to me. Mid-lasagna bite, so Mom is the money from the house sale all squared away. I'd barely unpacked when the real reason surfaced. I told him, yes, the funds had been deposited. He exchanged a look with Tracy. We've been thinking about investing. He said nothing. Risky. Great returns. Guaranteed. I told him. I'd think about it and watched his smile fade just slightly that first night. I laid in the narrow bed and stared up at the ceiling, listening to the low murmur of voices downstairs. Tracy's heels clicking across the floor. The clink of Wade pouring another glass of something expensive. I pulled out my small notebook, the one I used to track bills and savings, and crossed out the real number, $4, $700, and wrote in a lie, $100, just to see what would happen by morning. I was already part of the routine. Tracy knocked on my door at 7, asking me to make Kira breakfast. Wade left a note saying he had meetings and could I pick up the dry cleaning. I stood in the kitchen watching my granddaughter poke at toast. She didn't ask for and barely said goodbye before leaving with a friend. I spent the afternoon dusting shelves that didn't need dusting and folding laundry that wasn't mine, just trying to feel useful, but all the while, I kept wondering how long their smiles would last. Once they realized I wasn't the golden goose they were hoping for. The next morning started with the sound of Tracy's knock, sharp rhythmic, just outside my door at 6:59. I hadn't slept much. My back had stiffened up again from the narrow bed, and the ache had settled into my lower spine, like it always did after too many hours lying still. "Hadley," she called. "Could you make Kira some breakfast? Wade and I both have early meetings." I swung my legs over the edge of the bed and reached for my slippers. "Of course," I said, my voice still hoarse from sleep. By the time I got to the kitchen, the house was already empty. The only sign anyone had been there was a note on the counter, Wade's handwriting in quick, heavy strokes. "Meeting rescheduled. Back late. Don't forget to pick up Kira. 3. Bijou. No, please. No, thank you. Just a line like you'd leave for the dog sitter." I made scrambled eggs, toast, and orange juice. I even laid out a cloth napkin and set the silverware just the way I used to when Wade was a boy. When Kira came down the stairs, still glued to her phone, I greeted her with a smile. "Good morning, honey. I made breakfast." She gave the plate a passing glance. "I don't eat eggs," she muttered. "I don't eat breakfast at all." Then she grabbed an apple from the fruit bowl and headed for the door. "Wait, your dad asked me to drive you to school." "No need," she said without looking up. "Brittany's mom is already outside." The door closed behind her before I could say another word. I sat down at the kitchen table and ate the toast myself, though my appetite had already gone. The house felt quiet in a way that didn't invite peace, more like a museum after hours where everything was clean and placed just so. But nothing felt lived in. I wandered from room to room, not to snoop, just to get familiar with the place. The furniture all looked new showroom quality. There wasn't a single framed photo that wasn't taken by a professional. No birthday parties, no backyard barbecues, just wide smiles and oceans or yachts behind them. In the dining room, a stack of mail sat untouched near the entrance. I noticed red stamps on most of the envelopes, late fees, balances due. One credit card bill had a number so high it made my stomach turn. In my day, that would have bought you a small house. That afternoon, I picked up around the house, wiped the counters, made dinner chicken casserole, the kind Wade used to like. I'd just pulled it from the oven when I decided to drive over to Kira's school. It wasn't far, maybe 15 minutes. A large brick building surrounded by trimmed hedges and bright green lawns. It looked more like a private college than a high school. Students came out in clusters, all in uniform, plaid skirts, and navy blazers. I spotted Kira in a group of 3 giggling at something on a phone screen. When she noticed me, her whole face shifted. "What are you doing here?" she asked, walking toward the car. "I told you Brittany was taking me home. Your dad asked me to pick you up," I said gently. "Come on, I'll take you." She sighed and climbed in, shutting the door a little harder than she needed to. We drove for a few minutes in silence before she spoke again. "You know," she said, still looking out the window, "you don't have to do everything they tell you." I glanced at her. "What do you mean, Dad and Mom?" she said quietly. "They treat you like you're just there to help out. Like you're the help." I didn't answer right away. Her words hung there between us. "I'm just helping the family," I said finally. "That's what grandmothers do." She let out a sound that wasn't quite a laugh. "Yeah, right. And Mom and Dad just help you spend your money." The rest of the ride was quiet. When we got home, Wade was already in the kitchen, his phone in one hand, a whiskey glass in the other. "Hey, Mom," he said without looking up. "Dinner ready?" "Yes, I made casserole." "Rough day?" I asked, watching him refill his glass. "Not really," he said, but his tone didn't match his words. We sat down to eat, just the 3 of us. Tracy had a client meeting and wouldn't be back until late. Kira pushed her food around on the plate, her eyes drifting toward her phone every few minutes. I tried asking her about school, about her history project, but she kept her answers short. Then Wade set his fork down and looked at me. "Mom," he said, "have you thought about what we talked about? Investing the money from the house?" "What kind of investment?" I asked. "My project," he said. Me and my partner are starting an investment fund. A few clients are already in, but we need more seed money. 50,000 would do it. I kept my voice calm. That's a lot of money, Wade. You'd have equity, he said quickly, and I'd manage everything. It's low risk. I know what I'm doing. I thought about the unpaid bills I saw earlier, about the way he watched the mailbox like it might bite him. I can't risk that, Wade, I said. It's all I have for my old age. His tone turned sharper. What risk? It's a win-win. I'll think about it, I said, keeping my face steady. He didn't respond, just stood up, left his plate on the table, and walked off toward his office. A moment later, I could hear his voice behind the closed door, louder than necessary, talking about shares and interest rates. Across the table, Kira looked up from her phone. Don't give him the money, she said, her voice low but clear. Seriously, Grandma. Don't give it to him. She stood up without another word and disappeared upstairs. The next morning, I skipped my usual cleaning and went to the town library. I needed somewhere quiet, somewhere that didn't smell like lemon polish and tension. The Lake Forest Library had tall ceilings and big windows that filled the space with light. I drifted toward the fiction section, hoping to find a detective novel to clear my mind. Can I help you? A voice said behind me. I turned and saw a man in a tweed jacket with kind eyes and a name tag that read Harris Pierce, volunteer. Looking for something modern, I said, but not too violent. You're in luck, he smiled. That's my specialty. We walked through the aisles together. Harris was easy to talk to with a quiet humor that felt comforting rather than performative. He told me he used to be a financial consultant before retiring and now volunteered 3 days a week. When I told him I'd recently moved in with my son, he nodded in understanding. Been there, he said. You're not alone. I left the library with 3 books and a strange feeling of relief, like I'd stepped outside a fog for a while. But when I got home, the tension was waiting for me. Tracy was standing in the kitchen, arms crossed. I called you, she said, 3 times. I'm sorry, I replied. My phone was on silent. I was at the library. The library, she repeated. I needed you to pick up the dry cleaning. Wade has a meeting, and now his shirt's not ready. I didn't argue, just apologized and excused myself. Later that night, I overheard their voices behind the bedroom door. Tracy was upset. Something about a loan, the bank, deadlines. And then I heard Wade say, if your mother wasn't such a cheapskate, we'd have solved this by now. I stepped back from the door before I could hear more. I didn't need to. I already understood. They weren't disappointed in me. They were disappointed in the number I'd given them. And now they were trying to figure out what to do without it. That Saturday, the rain had let up just enough to bring out the birds. I'd spent the morning at the community garden near Town Square, pulled weeds, planted radishes, and swapped stories with a woman named Lauren, who used to teach history at the local middle school. She had kind eyes and a dry wit that made the hours pass quickly. Before I left, she handed me a card with her address scribbled on the back. If you ever need a place to breathe, she said, my porch has good chairs and better whiskey. The sky was still pale gray when I pulled into the driveway. And there it was, sitting right in front of the garage, a brand new silver Lexus. It had one of those oversized red bows stretched across the hood, like something out of a commercial. Tracy was circling it in heels, her phone up like she was filming her own ribbon-cutting ceremony. Wade stood off to the side with his arms folded. Do you like it? He asked as I stepped out of the car. It's beautiful, I said, setting my garden bag in the foyer. But I thought things were tight. He didn't look me in the eye. We got a great lease deal, practically nothing down. I nodded. Must have been a good offer. Tracy walked over, still glowing. First impressions matter in real estate, Hadley. This car will pay for itself. Later that evening, after the kitchen had been cleaned and the house quieted down, Wade found me folding towels in the laundry room. His voice was casual, but his eyes weren't. "We've been talking," he said, "and Tracy had an idea that might help you feel more comfortable." "Oh, that back of yours," he went on. "Stairs can't be easy. They're not," I said, folding the last towel, "but I manage. There's that little room down here." He nodded toward the door behind him. "No windows, but it's next to the bathroom. You wouldn't have to climb anything." I stared at him, trying to read between the lines. Tracy thought Kira could use more space upstairs. "Her school counselor says teenagers need room to grow." I shook my head. "I'd rather stay where I am, but I like waking up with light in the room," I said. "Makes the place feel more like home." He didn't push it, just knotted lips pressed into a tight line and left without another word. The next morning, I texted Harris and asked if he'd be at the library. He wrote back right away. "I'm here until 3. Come by." It was quiet when I left. Kira was still asleep, and Tracy hadn't come down yet. The rain had returned, but I didn't mind it. The streets shimmered, and for the first time in days, I felt like I was walking towards something that was mine. At the library, Harris greeted me with a coffee already waiting. He handed over a book I hadn't requested, but knew I'd like. We talked for a bit about old jobs, favorite meals, books that had stuck with us longer than they should have. When I stood to leave, he reached into his coat and handed me a folder. "Just something to think about," he said. Back at Wade's house, the folder still tucked in my bag, I found Tracy standing at the kitchen table, arms folded. Her voice was clipped. "I asked you to pick up the dry cleaning yesterday. I must have forgotten," I said. "I was at the library." "Well," she snapped, "now Wade's got a meeting tomorrow and nothing to wear." "I'm sorry," I said. "I'll go first thing." She didn't answer, just turned and walked away. That evening, I heard them again. Through the bedroom wall, their voices rising and falling behind closed doors. "You said you'd cover it?" Tracy's voice was sharp. "I had a plan," Wade snapped. "Then Mom went and lied about her pension. We're drowning, Wade. She's got more money than she admits, I know it." The next morning, I skipped the errands. Instead, I walked 2 blocks to the corner cafe and sat there with Harris's folder. Inside was a simple guide for checking credit activity. I hadn't thought about it before, not really. Robert and I paid off our house 10 years ago. We never had reason to worry. That afternoon, I mentioned it to Harris. We met back at the library. He pulled out his laptop and walked me through the process. It took less than 15 minutes. 3 credit cards, all opened within the last 3 months. A combined debt of over $40,000. My name on all of them. I stared at the screen like it belonged to someone else. "I never opened these," I said. My throat felt tight. Harris didn't look surprised. "It happens more than you think. How could they? He would have needed my signature." "You moved in." He had access. Documents lying around. I remembered my drawer upstairs, the file folder, the papers I hadn't looked at in weeks. "What do I do now?" "Call the banks," Harris said. "Report the fraud, then file a police report. That's my son." "I know," he said gently, "but it's still your name." When I got back to the house, there was someone waiting on the front step. At first, I didn't recognize her. Dark hair, pulled back jacket damp from the drizzle. Then she stood and said my name. "Gloria." She nodded. "Wade called me. We hadn't spoken in nearly 2 years. She moved to Portland after her divorce, and we'd exchanged birthday texts, but not much else." "He said you lied to him," she said, and walked out. "Is that what he told you?" She shrugged. "I wanted to hear your side. I invited her in, made tea, told her everything about the small room, the chores, the Lexus, the closet suggestion, the pension, the credit cards." She listened quietly. When I finished, she looked down at her cup. You always believed him? I didn't mean to. I wanted to go to art school, she said. You said it wasn't practical. Wade dropped out of college, and you said he was finding his way. I sat back. I didn't have an answer. You always showed up for him. Not for me. I didn't know you felt that way. Because you never asked. We sat in silence. Finally, I said, I didn't call you Gloria. Wade did. She nodded. I figured that out halfway through your story. Then she asked the question I'd been asking myself all day. What are you going to do? I told her. Harris and I would file the report the next morning. Her expression tightened. You'd really do that? Your own son. If I don't, I'll be the one paying off that debt. She stood up and started pacing. There's got to be another way. We can talk to him. We can figure this out as a family. He threatened to call the police if I didn't leave. I don't think he's looking for a sit-down. Gloria looked lost. That'll tear us apart. I didn't forge those signatures. She didn't argue. She just sat down again and stared at the window. That night, I barely slept. The wind had picked up, and the branches tapped the side of the house like an old clock. I sat at the table, my notebook open, and stared at the same line I'd written when I moved in 4700. It felt like someone else's number now. By the time Harris and I arrived at the Lake Forest police station, the sky had turned a dull, steady gray. The officer at the front desk was polite enough, but I could see it in his eyes, another elderly woman, with a folder of documents and a trembling voice. He handed over the forms, and we sat down at a corner desk, with an old computer and a plastic fern wilting on the windowsill. It took nearly 3 hours. Harris helped me list the credit card accounts, the forged signatures, the dates. I showed the officer copies of my original documents, including the signature on my house sale. When I finally signed the complaint, the officer looked up. We'll investigate, Mrs. Prescott, he said, but these cases often end in reconciliation. I'm not here for revenge, I said. I just want my name back. We stepped outside, and the air smelled like pavement and rain. Harris drove us back to Lauren's house, and I was just starting to wonder whether the day might finally quiet down when I saw someone sitting on the porch. Wade. He was hunched forward, elbows resting on his knees, staring at the concrete like it might tell him what to say. When he looked up and saw me, his eyes were red. Mom, he said, standing. We need to talk. Harris reached for the door, but I shook my head. It's all right. Wade and I sat on the bench in Lauren's garden, the one just beneath the old crabapple tree. He didn't speak for a long time. His hands were shaking. Finally, he looked down and said, The police came this morning, asked about the cards. I waited. I denied it at first, he said, but they found papers in my desk. Copies with your signature. My mouth felt dry. Why, I don't know, he whispered. I panicked. The bank was threatening foreclosure. Tracy didn't know how bad it had gotten. I thought I could fix it before you ever found out. But you needed my name to get the credit, I said. He nodded slowly. I thought I'd pay it off before it caught up to me. Then you told us your pension was only $1,100, and I thought, maybe you already knew. Maybe you were testing me. I didn't know, I said. That was never the plan. I just needed to know if you wanted me, not my money. He pressed his hands together. I failed that test. We sat in silence for a while. The wind rustled the branches above us, and the first few drops of rain began to tap at the leaves. What happens now? He asked. Am I going to prison? I don't know, I said quietly. That depends on the investigation. You could withdraw your statement, he said quickly. I'll pay everything back. I've already started. Please, Mom, think about Kira. Think about the family. His voice was desperate, but behind it I heard something else. A calculation. Like he was weighing options, not confessing. Did you come here to apologize? I asked, or to ask me to make it go away? Wade blinked, startled. I think we both need time to think, I said, standing. If you really want to make things right, start with the debt, and stop living like you've got money you don't. But how, he asked? I don't have that kind of cash. Sell Tracy's Lexus, I said. Cut the mortgage. Move to a place you can afford. He scoffed. You know she'd never agree to that. What would people say? There it was. That same fragile pride. Then you have a problem, I said, heading toward the porch. Mom, you can't do this to me. I'm your son. Yes, I said. You are, but that doesn't mean I let you use me. He didn't follow me up the steps. I watched from the window as he stood in the garden, shoulders tight, fists clenched. Then he got into the car and drove off the tires, spitting gravel. Lauren was waiting in the kitchen with a warm pot of tea. She didn't ask what had been said, just poured 2 mugs and slid one across the table. We sat quietly while the steam rose between us. What now? She asked. All my life, I said, I've done things for other people. Worked double shifts so the kids could go to summer camp. Skipped dinners to stretch the grocery budget. Took care of everyone except myself. And now, I said, I'd like to try the opposite. A week later, I sat across from Detective Morgan in a small office with gray carpeting and walls lined with manila folders. He laid a folder on the desk and opened it slowly. We've confirmed the signatures were forged, he said. That along with the account dates and statements gives us enough to press charges. What would the sentence be? I asked. Given the amount and that it's a first offense, likely 2 to 5 years. Maybe probation if the court's lenient. He watched me closely. You can withdraw the report if you choose, but be aware the banks might still pursue the debt. I nodded, but didn't say anything. Not yet. That evening, Harris took me to see a small house on Clement Street. 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, and a backyard with a single apple tree just starting to bloom. The inside smelled faintly of sawdust and floor wax. The windows were wide and let the light fall across the wood floors in long golden lines. It's not much, I said. It's yours, Harris replied. I called Wade the next morning and asked to meet at a cafe near the courthouse. He arrived looking worn down. His shirt wrinkled his collar uneven, like he hadn't paid much attention getting dressed. I've been to Morgan's office, I said once we'd ordered. They're moving forward. He nodded. They took the computer. My files. I know what I'm facing. I bought a house, I said. He looked up surprised. A house? A little one. I've always wanted a garden. I didn't know. You never asked. We sat in silence for a moment, then I leaned forward. I won't press charges. On 2 conditions. First, you pay off the loans. I've already started, he said quickly. Sold the car for $25,000. And Tracy agreed to that. Not right away. But I didn't have a choice. Second, I said, you and Gloria stay out of my finances. No advice. No requests. My pension, my savings mine. He nodded. That's fair. One more thing, I added. I've changed my will. Everything I have will go to charity and to a trust for Kira. Nothing for you or Gloria. He didn't flinch, just stared at the table. This isn't punishment, I said. It's clarity. Without the money, maybe we can rebuild something real. He looked up. Can I visit? Maybe, I said, but not yet. I need space. That weekend, Lauren helped me move in. Harris brought flower pots, lavender, and tomato starters and placed them along the back porch. The first night in that house, we drank wine and watched the sun fall behind the rooftops. The porch creaked a little when we laughed, but the chairs held firm. 2 days later, Gloria called. Her voice was softer than I remembered. I heard you didn't press charges. No, I said, but only because he met my terms. I didn't think you had that in you. I waited. Mom, she said finally about what I said before, about always favoring Wade. Yes, you were right. I've felt it for years. I just didn't know how to say it. There was a long pause. I'm sorry, she said. I closed my eyes. Thank you. I'd like to come visit, she said. If that's all right. Next month? Yes, I'd like that. The late afternoon sun was low in the sky, casting long shadows across the gravel path when I spotted her Kira sitting on the steps of my porch legs, tucked up under her, a camera resting on her knees. She looked up when I opened the gate and gave a little wave like she'd just been waiting for me to come home. What are you doing here? I asked, setting my bag of groceries down on the porch. I told Dad I had a photography class, she said, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. I didn't. I wanted to see you. Do they know where you are? She shook her head. They'd lose it if they did. Dad said you're a bad influence now. I sat down beside her. The porch boards were warm under us. Your dad and I are going through something hard, I said. It's complicated. I know. But it's not my fight, she said. And I don't care what they say. You're my grandmother. I'll come when I want. We didn't talk much after that. I went inside and brought out a pitcher of lemonade and 2 glasses. We sat in the garden and started pulling weeds from the raised beds. She asked me where I'd gotten the rose bushes, and I told her they were a housewarming gift from Harris. She didn't ask who he was, just smiled and nodded like she already approved. As we worked, she really talked the way she hadn't in weeks. About school, about her history teacher who gave too much homework, about a boy named Josh who always walked her to her locker, about the photos she wanted to enter into the spring arts fair. I took one of Dad when he wasn't looking, she said, adjusting her camera strap. He was sitting on the porch after you left. He looked different. I didn't respond right away. They fight a lot now, she said, quieter. Mom's still mad about the car. And they're talking about moving. Apartment closer to downtown. Smaller place. I pulled a stubborn weed from the corner of the bed. That might be a good idea. Mom hates it. She says she didn't marry him to live in a 2-bedroom with no view. The breeze picked up then just enough to carry the scent of the roses through the yard. Kira set her camera down in the grass and turned toward me. I want you to know I'm on your side, she said. You don't have to pick sides, I told her. You can love everyone, even if they disappoint you. But you're the only one who listens to me, she said. You're the only one who remembers my birthday without Facebook reminders. Who asks about my photos. I reached over and squeezed her hand. She didn't pull away. Your dad still loves you, I said, no matter how complicated it gets. She nodded. I know, but I'm allowed to love you too. The next few weeks settled into a quiet rhythm. I planted tomatoes and cucumbers. Harris helped install a trellis for the beans. Lauren showed up with fresh bread from the Saturday market and a potted lavender plant for my windowsill. Kira came by once after school and once on a Sunday morning when her parents thought she was at the library. She brought muffins both times and took more photos of the garden than I could count. Then one Thursday, I decided it was time. The boxes were finally unpacked, the curtains hung. I invited Harris and Lauren for dinner. Just something simple, a casserole, a salad, and that pie Lauren always baked with the sugar crust on top. We sat around my small dining table with mismatched chairs and laughed like old friends who'd known each other for years. To new beginnings, Harris said, lifting his glass. To old friends, Lauren added. The next day I was out back watering the rosemary when a car pulled up to the curb. Not the Lexus, a modest dark sedan I didn't recognize. Wade stepped out and looked around like he wasn't sure he had the right address. He walked up the path slowly, hands in his pockets. It's a nice garden, he said, glancing at the trellis. Looks peaceful here. Thank you. He hesitated. Can I come in? I looked at him carefully. He was dressed more simply now. No expensive watch, no polished shoes. Just jeans and a wrinkled shirt, the kind that looked like it had been worn more than once before ironing. For tea, I said, opening the gate. He stepped inside like the place might break if he moved too quickly. I poured us each a cup, and we sat at the kitchen table, the window open behind us, letting in the scent of the herbs on the sill. We sold the house, he said. Signed the papers this week. I nodded. Tracy started working again. Got a position at a marketing agency downtown, and I'm at a smaller finance firm now. Less money, but it's honest work. I'm glad, I said. He looked down at his cup. I paid off the last of the debt, the cards, the fees, all of it. That's good, Wade. I didn't come to ask for anything, he said. Just wanted to tell you that. We sat for a long moment in silence. I've learned a lot these past few months, he said. About money, about pride, about what I thought mattered. I nodded, but didn't fill the space for him. I don't know what comes next, he admitted. But I'd like to try again. Not with money, just as your son. Time will tell, I said gently. He nodded and stood. Thanks for the tea. When he left, I walked back into the garden. The sun was dipping behind the fence line, casting soft gold over the roses. I watched a bee land on one of the blossoms and stay there quiet and still. A lot had changed in a short time. The home I'd left behind. The family I thought I knew. But here in this small cottage with dirt under my nails and a dinner table full of laughter, I had found something that felt honest. Something that felt mine. Gloria arrived on a Friday morning 2 weeks after Wade's visit. I heard her car before I saw her tires crunching against the gravel engine, idling a moment too long before shutting off. I was out back deadheading the roses, and she called my name from the front gate, like she wasn't sure she was allowed to open it. When I came around, she was standing there holding a pie dish wrapped in foil, her purse tucked under one arm. It's cherry, she said. I remembered you used to like it. I still do, I said, opening the gate. Inside, she walked slowly through the house, taking in the little details, the curtains I'd sewn myself. The hand-carved salt box on the kitchen shelf, the watercolor painting Lauren had made of the crabapple tree. She didn't comment on any of it, just nodded softly like she didn't expect this place to feel so much like home. I didn't know what to expect, she said, setting the pie down on the counter. Neither did I when I bought it, I said. But it's grown on me. We sat in the kitchen with mugs of tea and a plate of shortbread cookies I'd saved for company. For a while, it was all small talk, how Kira was doing in school, the weather, the price of gas. Then she leaned back in her chair and said, Wade told me what you said, about the trust and the charity. I nodded. He also told me you meant it. I did. She stirred her tea slowly. He's different these days. I don't think he's pretending either. He's quieter. A little more careful with his words. Life has a way of forcing humility when we've run out of options. She looked down into her cup. I've been thinking a lot about what I said that night, about you choosing him, about how I've always felt like the backup plan. You weren't. I said quietly. But that's how it felt, she replied. When we were kids, you'd light up when Wade walked into the room. You used to say he reminded you of Dad. I didn't realize it showed. She smiled faintly. It did, and after he started college and I stayed behind to work, I think I made up my mind that I was second best. I didn't even question it. That was never the truth, I said. But I see now how I played a part in making you feel that way. She nodded. I appreciate that. Outside, a breeze stirred the branches of the apple tree and the wind chimes near the back door began to play their soft tune. It was the same set of chimes from the old house, the ones that used to hang on the porch near my sewing chair. I've been angry for a long time, Gloria said. Not just at Wade, at you, at everything. The way things were always just out of reach. The way I always felt I had to fight to be seen. I see you now, I said. Her eyes welled, and she looked down quickly, blinking it away. Do you still have that old photo album? She asked after a while. The one with the beach trip I've been thinking about that day a lot. It's in the back closet. I can get it. So we sat there on the floor of the living room, legs crossed like we were teenagers again, flipping through pages of sunburned smiles and paper napkins stuck to the bottoms of popsicles. There was one photo where Gloria had her arm slung around Wade's neck, both of them covered in sand, laughing at something outside the frame. You always used to call us your storm and sunshine, she said. You were both a little of each, I replied. She smiled. Can I come again next week? Of course. Before she left, she gave me a hug. A real one, not the kind with stiff shoulders and a quick pat on the back. She held on for a few seconds longer than I expected. And when she stepped back, she said, I've missed you. I've missed you too. After she drove off, I sat out back with a blanket and a book. But I didn't read much. My thoughts kept drifting about all the things Gloria had said, the way she'd carried those feelings for so long without saying a word. How easily old pain can turn into a story we tell ourselves over and over until it becomes the only one we believe. The next afternoon, I found a letter in my mailbox. No return address, just my name in small, careful handwriting. Inside was a single page, folded once. Dear Mrs. Prescott, I'm writing because I recently found out something that may concern you. I work at a financial firm that used to handle your estate. I've come across records that suggest there was a second account, one tied to your late husband's insurance payout, that was never disclosed to you. I believe the documents were altered. I didn't know what to do with this information until I saw your name again during the recent case involving your son. If you want to talk more, please call me. I'm including my direct line. LR. I read it twice, then a third time. Then I sat very still. My heart wasn't pounding. It wasn't racing. It was something deeper. Like the ground beneath me had shifted a few inches, just enough to knock something loose that had been buried for years. I set the letter down on the kitchen table, poured myself a glass of water, stared out at the backyard where the wind stirred the tomato leaves. There was something I didn't know. Something Wade might have known. Or maybe even Tracy. And if this letter was right, the betrayal went further back than I thought. I called the number the next morning. It rang twice before a soft-spoken voice answered. Leah Richardson speaking. I introduced myself. There was a pause on the line, long enough for me to think maybe she'd changed her mind, but then she said, "Thank you for calling. I wasn't sure you would." Her office was just across town. We met that afternoon at a coffee shop tucked between a tailor's and a dry cleaner, the kind of place where the booths still had cracked vinyl cushions and the tea came in thick white mugs. Leah looked young, not fresh out of college, but not far from it. She wore a navy blazer and a pair of tortoiseshell glasses that slid down her nose every time she looked at the papers she'd brought. She took a slow breath before she spoke. "I used to intern at Borden Financial," she said. 2 years ago, I came across some records during a systems audit. I flagged them, but they were marked as confidential and rerouted. I didn't think much of it until your name came up again in connection with a recent investigation. That's when I looked deeper. She slid a manila folder across the table. Inside were copies of account statements from over a decade ago, all tied to an insurance claim filed under my late husband's name. But the beneficiary had been altered. Not removed, just changed. Instead of my name, the account listed Wade. He had no legal right to it, she said quietly. The original policy lists you. Someone doctored the paperwork before the payout. The air in the diner felt thick. I flipped through the pages slowly. There was Wade's signature dated just weeks after the funeral. And a withdrawal one I recognize now, though I hadn't understood it then. It was the money he'd used to start the firm. The one he and Tracy had always said came from an investor friend. I looked at Leah. How did no one catch this? They buried it under a trust with false documentation, she said. And I don't think he did it alone. There's another name on the file. Your old attorney, the one who helped handle the estate. I closed the folder gently. He passed away 2 years ago. She nodded. I know, but the records are enough to open a case. I thanked her, and she gave me her card. Whatever you decide, I'll support it, she said. But I thought you deserved to know. When I got home, I sat at the kitchen table for nearly an hour, staring at the folder. The chimes outside ticked gently in the wind, and the hum of the refrigerator seemed louder than usual. I could still hear Wade's voice in my mind those early years after James passed, when Wade had insisted on handling everything so I wouldn't have to worry. When he told me I didn't need to sit through the meetings or chase down the paperwork. When he promised he'd make sure I was taken care of. I called Gloria that night. She listened in silence as I explained everything. When I finished, there was a long pause. He told me he got that money from a silent investor, she said. He said he worked hard for it. So did your father? I said. That policy was meant for me, for this family. What are you going to do? I haven't decided yet. She came over the next morning. We sat on the back porch, coffee cups balanced on the railing. The roses were in full bloom and the air was warm for late spring. I asked myself something last night, she said. If it had been me, if I had done what Wade did, would you have forgiven me? I don't know, I said. But I would have expected you to come clean. We were quiet for a while. Then she reached into her purse and pulled out a check, folded with my name written carefully on the front. This is from the money Mom left me, she said. You told us to keep it, but I don't want it anymore. Not while you're sitting here wondering who you can trust. I don't want your money, I said softly. I know, she said, but maybe you'll take my help. That evening, I wrote a letter to Wade. I didn't call. I didn't yell. I wrote the truth plainly and clearly. That I knew what he'd done. That the documents had surfaced. That I would be taking legal steps to recover what was rightfully mine. I wasn't seeking revenge. I wasn't trying to destroy him. But I was done being lied to. Done being the one who had to hold the family together, while everyone else chipped away at its foundation. A week later, I received a reply. Not from him, but from an attorney. It was a settlement offer. Quiet. Private. An agreement to return the full amount of the missing insurance payout adjusted for interest. No court, no public record. I brought the letter to Leah. She read it twice. It's fair, she said, and it's an admission, even if it's not written that way. I signed the documents 3 days later. The funds arrived by wire that Friday. I didn't hear from Wade again. But 3 weeks after the deposit cleared, a small package showed up on my doorstep. No return address. Inside was a photo one from years ago. Wade and Gloria sitting on the hood of James's old truck, both laughing at something just out of frame, and tucked inside the envelope was a note written in familiar handwriting. I was wrong. I'm sorry. Do something better with it than I did. The money went into a foundation one Gloria and I set up in James's name, for local kids, scholarships, mentorship programs. Something steady. Something lasting. And when the first round of recipients came to tour the garden that summer, one of the boys asked if I'd always lived in such a peaceful place. No, I told him, smiling. But sometimes, peace is something you build with your own 2 hands. The garden came alive that summer in a way I hadn't seen in years. The hydrangeas pushed out blooms as big as dinner plates, and the lavender spread thick and fragrant along the path Wade used to race down as a boy. The new benches Gloria helped install were painted soft gray, and each one carried a small brass plaque, donors, sponsors, family names. But one tucked beneath the old birch near the back gate simply read, James Finch, Builder of Roots. I sat there most mornings, a cup of tea warming my hands, watching the sun slip through the trees like it was learning how to rest again. The first group of scholarship kids came in mid-June, high schoolers mostly. A few of them shy, some bold, all of them curious. They asked good questions. One boy named Trey wanted to know who the garden was named after. I told him it didn't have a name, that it didn't need one, that sometimes the things that last don't have to shout. Kira showed up a week later. I was out back watering the herbs when I heard the crunch of tires on gravel. She stepped out of her car, slow, like she wasn't sure she should be there. She'd grown taller, more composed. Her hair was pulled back in a loose bun, and she had on jeans and a faded college sweatshirt. She didn't come all the way to the door, just stood by the gate with something in her hand, a small bundle of lavender wrapped in twine and a folded note. I turned off the hose and walked over. She didn't speak right away, just handed it to me and said I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. I nodded. I believe you. She looked like she wanted to say more, but instead she gave a quiet thank you and walked back to her car. I waited until she was gone before opening the note. It was only a few lines. Grandma, I remember the stories you told me when I was little. I used to pretend your voice was what held the stars up at night. I'm sorry I forgot how much you mattered. I'm sorry for how I treated you. I hope you're happy now. I pressed the note between the pages of my garden ledger, not because I needed proof, but because some things deserve to be kept close. That fall, Gloria and I hosted the first community harvest day. Dozens of people came, neighbors, families, students. We had cider and folding chairs and a little local band that played old gospel songs under the elm tree. A woman from the high school art department brought students who painted scenes of the garden on canvas boards. One of them caught the sunlight just right on the arbor, the vines casting long shadows across the gate. As the sun dipped low and the last guests began to leave, I walked the garden path one last time. It looked different now, not just because of the flowers or the painted signs, but because of what it held. The silence wasn't lonely anymore. It was peaceful, full, like something had been returned. I think sometimes justice doesn't arrive in sirens or headlines. Sometimes it shows up in small things. A folded note, a name on a bench, a granddaughter who finally looked you in the eye. And maybe that's enough. If this story meant something to you, if it reminded you of your own journey or someone you love, I hope you'll share it. Maybe there's someone out there who needs to hear it too.